Hello Math 152 students. In this video we are going to take a look at some issues in 3.3. I want to make sure you remember that you have those videos for this section if you want to see a discussion of some of these problems worked out by hand. We're going to take a look at the first example, and your book is going to go into great detail of how to do these formulas by hand, again realizing that the formulas look a little scarier than what's actually going on. But I'm just going to highlight some StatCrunch issues. If you enter this data into StatCrunch with hyphens, StatCrunch knows how to handle this. Go to Summary Stats, group to Bind data. Notice our frequencies or our counts. You have to choose the consecutive lower limits option. This is not the default, but we are defining the midpoints by looking between the 8 and the 9. So the midpoint for my first category will be 8.5, as your book describes. Hit compute. And notice I didn't deselect anything, but what I really want to look at here is the mean. And if you compare to what your textbook tells you by hand, it's actually telling you 13.1. And what I want you to remember is that this is an approximation. You don't know if these two individuals are 8.1, 8.9. So all of this is an approximate mean, an approximate variance, standard deviation, etc. But you can run into some issues entering your online homework answers because you have to round. So if it asks you to round to 1 decimal place, you're great. But in other places, it can be off just enough to cause you some issues. Here's what StatCrunch is doing. They are looking at the 8 and the 9 to calculate the midpoint of 8.5 to mimic what your book is doing. 9 to 10, they do 9.5 for the second. All is good until they get to the last row. Here, notice there's not a next lower limit, a next consecutive lower limit, so StatCrunch kind of messes up what's happening here. If you want it to do exactly what your by hand formula is doing, you actually have to trick it a little bit. You have to tell it the last lower limit would be 20, and there's none of those. Right, so you actually don't even have to enter a range. You just have to tell it stops at 20, or that last midpoint would be 19.5. And notice what happens if we recompute. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Notice I get a mean of 13.1, which is exactly what the by hand formula gives you. And notice the standard deviation, again, it's not off by much, but if you were going to 3 decimal places, notice you have an issue. A lot of times we do want to go to 3 decimal places, so you might have my math lab telling you over and over again that this is not the correct answer, 2.181, because it wants 2.182 to 3 decimals here. So this is just one kind of workaround that your book doesn't address. Putting in that last lower limit and then telling it there's nobody in that group will help StatCrunch know what to do.